Brewmaster has received the love of the Blizzard World of Warcraft team in 11.2. Hello there, I'm Flame from Marcelian&Flame, bringing you the news. Not really the news, but the changes to Brewmaster Monk in the new season, which are good so far, actually very good, when people have been crying out for the spotlight to be shown on them for years and years and years. Now, will these changes make Brewmaster the best tank in the game? Probably not. Will it make it a good tank? Still debatable, but at least solves some issues that Brewmaster had, and more importantly, it put Brewmaster back on the map, hoping that with our feedback and our constructive criticism, we can get Blizzard to actually make Brewmaster into an awesome tank once again. So let's quickly check out what has changed. One change that I'm not 100% sold on is Zen Meditation going away and being replaced with Zen State. Let's talk about why that is. First of all, Zen State is actually a better replacement for Zen Meditation, which makes the effectiveness of your stagger be increased by up to 20% based on your missing health. However, Zen Meditation has been a cornerstone of the fantasy of Brewmaster, at least in my opinion. It wasn't the most important ability, but it was a unique thing that Brewmaster used to do that also rewarded you for being able to time it properly and negating almost an entire attack or big spell that would hit you. I'm not a fan of removing abilities because they don't see much use as opposed to just making them as a choice note, which this Zen State would be as, where it wouldn't change what talent path you would have, and it would keep people having their Zen Meditation ability that they would love, which I would number myself in. So I'm just a little bit worried about this style of talent changes. As we go into the other talents, I do want to point out that some talents have been moved around and some talents in the PTR have been bugged and we weren't able to test them properly. But I will mention the first one on that list, which is Niuzao's Resolve. Healing spheres now heal you over 10 seconds and their healing is increased by up to 80% based on your missing health. So this turns it into a hot and not an instant heal, and that's kind of how Brewmaster mitigation works, keeping your HP bar more steady and of course can give you more healing. And supposedly this also works with your Celestial Fortune passive. But since we weren't able to test, we don't know if the numbers are good enough, although on paper they sound like they are. This should make new players or unexperienced players with Brewmaster feel better and safer behind the wheels of the tank. And also to solve that problem, Celestial Brew has a choice node that it shares with Celestial Infusion, a replacement of Celestial Brew that does mathematically almost the same thing. It gives you an absorb shield that absorbs just as much damage as Celestial Brew, it just doesn't do it all at once. While you have this up, 20% of the incoming damage is directed towards this shield. So if you've played Pro Warrior, this is essentially Ignore Pain, a weaker version of Ignore Pain. Of course, the Absorb Shield can be increased by your Purified Chi, just like how Celestial Brew would do, but instead of giving you one chunk of an Absorb Shield that you just go through all at once, it gives you an Absorb over the course of a longer period of time, essentially smoothing out your HP bar more as opposed to Celestial Brew, which if you weren't aware of the damage that you were taking, once this absorb would have been depleted, your HP would start to dip down again, giving you some heart palpitation moments. This is not what Celestial Infusion does, and this is also once again great for players that want to get into Brewmaster and were discouraged about its yo-yoing HP bar. And now we get to the best part that happened to Brewmaster, which is not fully solved yet, but Invoke Niuzao has finally been addressed. Now it's in the middle part of the talent tree, which it was before, but a couple of things have changed. Baseline now Invoke Niuzao, a 3-minute cooldown, summons an effigy of Niuzao, the Black Ox, for 25 seconds that attacks your primary target and stomps when you cast Purify, damaging all nearby enemies. While active, 40% of the damage delayed by stagger is instead staggered by Niuzao, and Niuzao is healed for 100% of your purified stagger. A couple of things changed here. First of all, the stomp damage is not based off of how much damage you take from your stagger bar that you purify, so you're not incentivized to deliberately take more damage so that you can do more damage, which was a problem with the degenerate use of this cooldown in the past, creating an undesired playstyle for Brewmaster Monks where they felt they needed to force themselves to die in order to do more damage. That's great. It also solves another problem where Niuzao would probably die at one point if you purified way too much damage because there was no way to keep it alive. So now that it can get healed for the 100% of damage that you purify means that it probably won't ever die so long as the pet AI doesn't mess something up. We also have Walk with the Ox that has also changed. It's a 2-pointer that says your damaging abilities have a chance to invoke Niuzao, causing him to charge to your target location and stomp. The cooldown of Invoke Niuzao, the Black Ox, is reduced by 30 seconds. And if you put 2 points in, that would be 1 minute, taking Niuzao down to a 2-minute cooldown. This is debatable, and I'm not yet convinced that this is a good way to spend your 2 talent points because it is very expensive to do so. Niuzao on its face is a good defensive cooldown. It makes you, for all intents and purposes, 40% tougher, so essentially gives you 40% damage reduction. That is pretty big on a 2-minute cooldown, but you do have to spend 3 points to do that, while the occasionally stomps are fine to get, but not really what you're after. So because Brewmaster is a very hard tank to judge and analyze as someone who's not very experienced, and I would include myself in that bucket as well, I have no idea if Walk with the Ox is something that I would want over something like Fortified Brew Determination or even High Tolerance. And because that is not very clear to me, I have no idea if this is a powerful talent unless somebody else tells me to, which brings us to a problem that overall Brewmasters have that makes this a class to still have design flaws. Part of those design flaws are the capstones, which we will get after I talk about the last talent here, Improved Invoke Niuzao, the Black Ox, which turns the button of summoning Niuzao into another button that you can use to stomp and cause Niuzao to throw enemies up in the air, essentially turning this into the thunderstorm that shamans have, just a utility button in the middle of the talent tree in a spec that was already very hard-pressed to find room to put more points into other talents. This is a utility ability. This is not what players would like to have, or at least I wouldn't like to have in my talent tree, especially down towards the bottom part of the talent tree instead of giving me more power, either more damage or more survivability, which this does neither of, unless you want to count them being knocked up in the air as survivability because they just don't hit you for about, I don't know, 2 seconds for however long they are knocked up in the air. Something that you can just accomplish by having an enhancement shaman or even a mage, which there are so many of these days, and they don't have to trade survivability or damage to be able to acquire this type of sustain. And damage is important because Brewmaster has struggled a very long time with damage output. Something that's not very obvious that it struggles with on the PTR right now, but that could be because of bugs, that could be because of tuning, and that's just not part of the Blizzard's mentality of tanks being able to do a lot of damage. And since nothing has been buffed in terms of the damage that Brewmaster does, unless they want to keep the tier set being this strong as it is right now, it's unlikely that Brewmaster will solve this problem of damage. So this talent is something that I don't know if I'm going to use personally myself. And this brings us to the actual problem that still hasn't been addressed for Brewmaster, which is the capstones being terrible. Very terrible. Not just the capstones, but some of the talents leading into them are very terrible as well in terms of the overall value that they give you. The only thing that you will probably use in the PTR as it stands right now is Chi Surge, just because the tier set for Shadow Pan makes Weapons of Order so good and so powerful that Chi Surge just adds on top of that value. But this is a problem that we've had in past expansions where tier sets fix an issue with the class design, something that I would have hoped we would have strayed away from with the modern version of class design. That's not true for the other 3 capstones. That's still not true for Ox Stance, which is very difficult to justify as a talent expenditure because, as I mentioned before, having talent points available for Brewmaster is a rarity, and considering that most of Brewmaster's power comes from the middle part of the talent tree, which is very counterintuitive for an RPG game that wants you to build towards these capstones, would turn this spec for new players a nightmare to try to build unless you are going to copy-paste builds off of the internet. Again, not something that you would want to do if you want to simplify the game for new players. All in all, as a conclusion, these changes are 90% very good. I'm not sold off on Niuzao, but I'm glad that they're looking at it because Brewmaster hasn't used this ability, I think, since probably Shadowlands or maybe the first patch of Dragonflight, and not having your most iconic cooldown for your spec be usable is a crime, as big as the capstones not being powerful enough for you to put points into, where you would rather just spend points in the middle of your talent tree. All in all, good. Hopefully we'll have more changes to it because Brewmasters have been ignored for way too long. almost as much as Prot Warrior has, which we already have a video on covering the rework. It is Tank Fiesta, baby. It's coming Season 3 with a lot of tank changes, and you can be a happy tank as well. And if you don't know how or why, check our Prot Warrior rework video.